Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Justin Banon, one of the co-founders at Boson.
And I'm Gregor, the other co-founder.
So today we're really excited to reveal Boson Protocol V2. So V2 is a massive upgrade on V1 and really represents kind of trustless commerce infrastructure. So really pleased to be able to present this to you today. So the problem that we solve rests on the fact that smart contracts are disconnected from the real world. So what do we mean by this? Well, you know, as everyone here should know, smart contracts can't see the real world on their own. So, you know, they need, in order to be able to kind of trust external data sources, they need data oracles. But a closely related problem to this is that smart contracts can't affect the real world on their own. So if we have an instruction or a transaction originating in a smart contract, they can't trust that they've executed in the real world. And this is a kind of general problem. And so they need a different type of oracle to reliably be able to act on the real world. And so, in its most general sense, this is what Boson Protocol is. And we describe this as a general purpose, decentralized actuator oracle. So we're talking about this very, very generic property of being able to reliably execute real-world actions. And Boson Protocol, at its core, is unopinionated as to what those actions should be, but is a general purpose mechanism for enabling smart contracts to affect the real world in a reliable way. However, although the core of Boson Protocol is generic, for V2 we are focusing on commerce, and specifically enabling Web3 to connect with real-world commerce. And our vision is to enable a single digital market for physical things. So imagine if, instead of like products, services, etc., all of these things being listed and transacted on different websites, or Amazon and Alibaba and different proprietary websites. Imagine if, in the same way that you can search for pretty much any piece of information or data on the internet, imagine if all of these products and services were listed in a common format into this sort of single digital market for physical things, and then could execute in an automated fashion without the need for trusted counterparties or intermediaries. And so that is the vision of Boson. And really what we're looking at is creating like a Uniswap for e-commerce.
Yeah, so we learned a lot from our version 1, and V2, we say it's a fair exchange protocol that is efficient because it minimizes the number and cost of transactions involved. It is also optimistic because it assumes that the optimistic path will follow. It is highly automated because the majority of disputes will be resolved by a mutual resolution game, which is game theoretically incentivized, and will have escalation only exceptionally. A big focus was on simplicity. It helped with the design for the user experience as well as developer experience. It is trust minimized because the escalation to a dispute resolver who is a commoditized service provider is only by exception, and the dispute resolver has only minimal market power. We say that it's cost mutualized because we mutualize the costs of escalation across multiple seller transactions to reduce the impact on transactions, especially low-value ones. So these are the problems that Boson V2 solves. So how to create an infrastructure where we don't need to trust sellers or introduce intermediaries. These three problems are core to that, especially if you consider that in commerce, the majority of trades are involving physical assets. So physical asset oracle problem, the fair exchange problem, and creating a single digital market for physical things. The physical asset oracle problem is about ensuring that the bearer of a digital token can redeem it for the physical thing. That's a hard problem to solve, but our solution is based on game theoretically incentivized forward contracts, which you can imagine as an agreement to execute a trade or an exchange at a specified price sometime in the future. And the trade here is generally paying with digital assets to get a physical thing. So in this case, the seller makes an offer and we did an optional commitment deposit or security deposit and promises to deliver the thing to anybody that holds a redeemable token that corresponds to that offer. A buyer can purchase this redeemable token on-chain and promises to redeem it. So while with committing to this exchange, the buyer accepts the responsibility to follow through his promise. Otherwise, they could face a cancellation penalty. Note here that we are not tokenizing assets. Justin explained why that is unavoidably hard. Instead, we are tokenizing promises or the right to claim a thing. And with this abstraction, Boson can cover for practically any kind of exchange, including exchanging physical assets. So the fair exchange problem is about ensuring that the exchange goes through as generally intended. In essence, the seller offers a thing and the buyer commits to it. If the buyer is happy, the process goes through very smoothly. The protocol assumes optimistic path, so the process goes just through the middle vertical line here from offer to buyer commit and then redeem for the physical thing. With that, there is really no other transaction needed for the trade to complete, and that's it. In case there is a dispute, the buyer is not happy with the quality or the item wasn't delivered, this is now the challenging part. And buyer has an option here to raise a dispute. Here we have a two-step resolution process. Boson facilitates a path where buyer and seller can negotiate and resolve disputes locally. So this is our mutual resolution game, which is kind of a black box and can be customized. More details are available in the new white paper, but we will provide a few templates for, depending on the use case, the buyer and seller can play the according game that best suits their needs. So this will cover the majority of use cases. And we know the mutual resolution will be successful often just because there exists another path, a more dreadful escalated dispute resolution. So the dispute, the escalation involves a dispute resolver that could be an independent or a decentralized entity. They are known in advance at the offer created time, and buyer and seller also agree in the terms that this will be the resolver, with knowing also the evidence that will be required to present in case the resolver is called. So dispute resolver is costly and slow, but as such, buyers know that in advance, and they expect that the resolver will resolve fairly. This means that actually they are better off if they resolve their disputes on their own and are honest in advance, just to reduce the cost and time. So in essence, the process goes through offer and exchange, and in case of a dispute, there's a two-step dispute resolution. So we've solved the two important parts of the creating a commerce infrastructure. The remaining part is how to make it alive and cater for a single digital market for physical things. So our solution is to tokenize commitments to trade as standard NFTs. So the holder of that NFT, a buyer, can hold it and ignore it if they so choose, but they can also trade it and transfer it and bring the whole power of DeFi to it. It is something that's obvious to us in Web3 ecosystem, but it's a quite powerful new capability compared to the legacy commerce infra.
Great, thanks, Gregor. So yeah, we're now on this sort of countdown to V2 launch, which is due around about the end of September, early October, and we are signing up launch partners, whether those are kind of sellers, marketplaces, or builders. You can find out more on our website, and if you'd like to read the full white paper, which we've just put up on the website this morning, you can just scan that QR code, and yeah, great to answer any questions.
How do you, like, what do you think the sort of stakes would be when someone's wanting to buy something, or if they're selling something, do they also stake some token as well? And what do you expect those values to be?
So there are seller and buyer optional deposits, and so I mean they're optional and they're set as a kind of value dependent on the kind of, they control the reversibility of the transaction. So those two deposits, if the buyer or the seller don't go through with the transaction, they, you know, it's kind of, I guess on the buyer side, it's similar to if you book an expensive restaurant and don't turn up, you might lose like 50 euros or something. But there's also one on the seller's side. But obviously, if you were like buying from like, you know, a trusted seller, like a Nike or someone, you might not require the seller because you're expecting, you know, it's a high trust environment. But if you were buying, you know, something in the metaverse pseudonymously from a seller, and you know, because the buyer's got to lock up capital, then you might want to have the seller to have some skin in the game, just so that you know it's not a time waste. So those two deposits they control both the reversibility, and they also are a substitute for trust. So there's no kind of fixed amount, but our two kind of game theorists are actually doing live economic studies in this. I mean, one of the really interesting things about blockchains and is it's sort of turning economics into like an experimental science. So we've got two top game theory kind of researchers, and they're going to be doing live academic research in this using Boson. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you doing anything for Sybil resistance, or do you have any plans?
Sybil resistance in terms of
for sellers and buyers.
we're not really at this stage. We're not kind of there aren't any significant attack vectors for sort of Sybil resistance, and in what way would?
Well,
yeah.
I was imagining there are reviews for sellers and buyers, for example.
Yeah, I mean, this is an area of development, and so what the basis of how we're going to kind of build up the reputation is that a sort of pseudonymous address would need to build reputation over time. But yeah.
You could also imagine that for trusted sellers, you don't need anything beyond their name. But for untrusted sellers, they can put optional deposit, right? And that's their stake in it. This can be a costly thing, so Sybil resistance is sort of implied by that.
And maybe also KYC for some sellers.
Yes, but that doesn't come at the smart contract level layer.
Yes, yes.
That can be done above. Yeah.
Thank you.